church family, welcome back to the FBC Durant podcast. I'm Garrett.
I'm Corey.
And I'm Cole. I'm filling in for my wife once again. And today we're kicking off a series of episodes where we meet with our staff at First Baptist Church. And so we're going to do 4 episodes here with our staff. And today we have Ken Bartholomew with us, who is our pastor of worship and administration. And today we're going to talk about worship. Our next episode, we're going to talk about connection. So our discipleship pillars of our pillars of our discipleship pathway are worship, connection, discipleship, and mobilization. So we're talking about worship today. We're going to talk about connection on next episode. We're going to talk about discipleship, and then we're going to talk about mobilization. We're going to talk about each of those things and how they meet the mission and vision of our church. And so, again, today we have Ken Bartholomew with us, who has been at this church since 2003, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay, and he's our longest currently serving pastor at this church. And
wow.
So, yeah.
You've seen some stuff.
I've been here a while. I think I've been the longest. I don't know about other staff guys. I just looked through that book about previous pastors, and so I've surpassed the tenure of any previous pastor. Okay, I don't know about other staff guys.
Wow.
So
yeah, you're getting into
that's a good point. Yeah.
21 years and never would have dreamed that. But it's been great.
Cool.
That's awesome. Which will be interesting in regards to worship and worship music as we discuss those things.
Yeah.
But we're not discussing administration. That one's off the table.
I think we can. Okay. That'll be fun too. I'm sure there's all kinds of stories that come with that also.
Yeah.
But that'll be good. But as we get to know Ken, I want to play a little game that we'll carry on with the others. I'm calling it First Takes for First Baptist of Durant. First Takes, here's the rules. We're going to give a topic, and I want you to share the first thing that comes to mind. Now, I haven't set you up. It's not going to be anything crazy. Should be familiar territory. But we'll start out easy. What is your go-to lunch pick for Monday staff lunch?
Oh, gosh.
That could be hard for some guys.
Yeah, I'm pretty much a what's the name of the restaurant on South Ninth? Sherr's.
Sherr's, yep.
I probably pick that more often than not.
That's a solid pick. Okay. Best college sports team of all time.
Texas Longhorns.
Okay, he's UT. Well, I need North Carolina. I didn't know.
Tar Heels are close. Well, I don't know. Maybe because I'm a native Tar Heel, lived in Texas for 23 years. So
wearing light blue, sitting on an orange couch.
Yeah.
He's a man divided.
Probably only said Longhorns because I live in Oklahoma and like to gig my sooner friends. But,
that's funny, especially this year. The staff member most likely to prank another. Y'all got any of those?
Ooh, most likely to prank. I would have said Stuart Tilley when he was here, but of the current staff, that's kind of a mystery. I don't picture any of them being big pranksters.
Okay.
I've seen Sebastian pull off some pranks already. If you've seen the little tiny Jesuses around anywhere,
that's fair.
He's got Gary. He's gotten several people on him. It might be Sebastian.
Student pastor.
That's a good call. Yeah, he's just kind of the new guy. I'm still trying to test him out.
Staff member most likely to make a happy plate.
A what?
Happy plate, like completely
you finish all your food.
Empty happy plate. Is that a new phrase? They don't.
Yeah, that's a new one for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Happy plate. Ken's had kids out of the house for a little while. He probably just forgot.
What makes a clean, like who when you go to eat lunch,
food.
go finish it all?
That's a no-brainer, Sebastian.
Really?
That dude can eat.
I've heard that.
Oh my gosh.
He can throw back. Cole can rival him a little bit.
And now I know where you're going with happy plate. I just thought, I don't remember us calling it
Happy belly, happy
Clean
plate.
Plate Club when my kids were little.
Clean Plate Club. Yeah. I like that. That's cool. All right, last one. Who has the better sock game out of Ken Bartholomew or Jacob Taves?
Oh man, Jacob puts on a pretty solid sock game. I don't know though.
I enjoy those Facebook posts. I'm looking forward to them on Sunday mornings. Have you seen these?
Oh yeah, I've seen them.
Okay, yeah. I like it a lot.
I've abandoned it for a little bit. I'll try to get back on the wagon because I did get some new socks during the Christmas season. So
Christmas
pull those out.
lunchtime.
Nice. All right.
Very good. Well, that's just a little icebreaker into the life and world of Ken. But if you would share a little bit about your roles in ministry here at the church. Now we talked about the length of time you've been here, but what do you do, and how did you come to ministry? How did your life lead you into those roles?
Well, I'll start back with just how I came into ministry.
Yeah.
So I came to know the Lord as a teen, and my family moved around a lot. Now, Brother James, when he was pastor, used to tell me that I lived everywhere. I think he actually lived more places than me, but he used to give me a hard time about that. So born in North Carolina, grew up in Georgia, back to North Carolina, went to Ohio, graduated from high school in Ohio, moved to Texas to go to college. So that's, kind of the whirlwind tour of my growing up. But when I was graduating high school, was really wrestling with what I wanted to do for a living. My dad was an air traffic controller, hence why we moved around a lot. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. That's not a job that you go into like right out of school, and there's not really there is a school for that, but you sort of have to wait a few years. It's not like something you just jump right into. Most people get into it through military or other, and I wanted no part of that at that time in my life.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll just kind of skate around but just begin to wrestle with the question of what do I want to do? What am I going to be? When I grow up, and at the same time, really wrestling with what the Lord might want me to do, and had a lot of musical experiences in high school and church work, and just began to grasp and ask the Lord, what do you want me to do? And began to sense His call into ministry. And at the time, remember thinking, I'm not exactly sure what this looks like, but I think you want me to do something. I think back, and during that couple of years, the little church that we were going to in Ohio hired their first youth minister ever.
Oh, wow.
He was a 30-year-old graduate of Ohio State University, just graduated at 30. And the church called him to be the first youth minister, and he's the only youth minister I ever had. So he was my youth minister for about 2 years, and then I graduated. But he was the Lord used him to play an instrumental part in helping me deal with God's call in my life. And so as a senior, I thought, okay, Lord, I'm going to do this. I don't know what that looks like. Not many Baptist schools in Ohio. In fact, there were 0 at the time. And I just had my best friend that I grew up with in Georgia was going to Houston Baptist University.
Okay.
And I thought, well, if I'm going to go into church work, I probably ought to go to a Baptist school. So sight unseen, I was in the middle of track season, couldn't make a college visit. So my dad flew to Houston for me to check out the college. And in August of '81, packed up and drove to Houston, Texas, 1,100 miles away from home, and began my studying music. I kind of told myself and told the Lord, I said, I'll study music, and if this is not it, you'll show me that. If I stink and I can't do this, you'll reveal that, and I'll go into something else. But hindsight's 20/20, and I look back and was able to complete a music degree with really not much formal musical training. So. And through that time, had a lot of opportunities to be involved in ministry. Met my wife. We sang in a traveling singing group that was part of the university. Got to fill in at a lot of different churches and lead worship. And so that was kind of my evolution into music ministry. My first church job, and until I came to Durant, every other church I'd ever served was a dual role purpose. So my first full-time church job was a music and youth minister at a little church down on the Gulf Coast in Houston, outside of Houston. And did that for about 6 years. And while I was doing that, I was going to seminary at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, working on a religious education degree. I thought, well, I've got a degree in music. Toyed with the idea of getting a master's in music and worship, but thought, no, I kind of want to just diversify a little bit. And so I was able to get a master's degree in religious education. And when I graduated, moved to a church in Pasadena, Texas.
Okay.
So I was music and education minister at that church for a few years. had some good ministry there. The Lord took us to the Tyler, Texas area. And again, I was music and education at a church there for almost 7 years. And then First Baptist Durant came calling. Sally Clark, who just passed away, had a good friend that was in my church, and First Baptist was looking for a music guy. That, as I understand, they were kind of having difficulty finding somebody. And so Sally's good friend that was in my church said, well, you ought to come look at our guy, which was me. And next thing I knew, I was in Durant. And when I moved here, my job was just worship. It's the first time I had ever had a role of just a single position, and loved it. I always felt that a dual role person, that my time was divided. Never felt like I could do one as good as I thought I might do if that was all I had to do. As a music and youth, I was trying to do youth ministry, trying to lead worship. Felt a tug in both directions. The same thing with education. Because when you say minister of education, there's not much that doesn't touch in a church. Bible study, Sunday school. It reaches almost every tentacle of church. Children, preschool, the whole 9 yards. So I always felt a little frustrated doing that. And so came here and was just doing worship, and we had senior adult choir and our celebration choir, children's choirs, handbells, some semblance of an orchestra. And so that was some great times and interesting. I just loved that was my only responsibility. I didn't have to mess with anything else but that.
Focus.
So that's what brought me here, and kind of my evolution and where I've been. Along the way in my 21 years here, especially as I'm the longer I've gotten into this, my role has switched, and I do music and administration. So kind of stepping back into a little bit of that, you're trying to juggle two jobs.
Yeah.
What I didn't anticipate upon making that move was that First Baptist Church is a $1 million enterprise. We're $1 million business.
Yeah.
Which means we write lots of checks and we pay a lot of bills and we do a lot of trade and stuff like that. So I was not prepared for that when I stepped into the role of administration. I have to sign literally hundreds of documents a week. So there's a lot involved there, but I love it.
That's cool.
When I was looking to make that transition, I had talked to some people and said, hey, how does a guy that's been a worship pastor for a number of years, is it possible for him to step into administration? And part of that was because I've begun to realize in my later years with some health situations I've had that music may not be something I'll be able to do for much longer.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time that is, but having trouble hearing, had a cancer bout with cancer that has diminished some of my capacities that I used to have, and so began to think about maybe some other. If I don't do worship ministry, what am I going to do? I'm not out.
Yeah.
I don't want to just step out of ministry and say, well, I'm done. I guess I'll go be an insurance salesman or something. That didn't appeal to me. So what avenue could I step into and still stay in ministry? So anyway, I talked to this guy, and he said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, because it depends on what kind of music person you are. Because some music people are very scatterbrained and not well organized. And he said, if you're that kind of person, you're probably not going to make that transition very easily. But if you're the kind of person who's kind of organized and can do things you do things in a real organized manner, then you'll do great at it. I said, well, okay, that helps me a lot. I think I'm an organized guy. Yep. Sometimes you might look at my desk and think otherwise, but I do think I know where everything is in that organized mess. So
it's like asking, are you a traditional worship pastor or a contemporary worship pastor?
We know where those fall.
Okay, traditional, so you're organized. Got it.
Yeah,
cool.
right,
You actually
exactly.
read music. Great. Awesome. Cool. You can do this.
You do things in order. Well, that's very cool. Well, I think that long tenured really helps in the administrative side. Just seeing so much of church life and church world and different places and spaces Yeah, that's a blessing to have those things to contribute.
That's been a big help, I think. You know,
Yeah,
I've been able to see us change in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking before we started about the way our worship times and things have changed over 21 years. You know, when I first came, our contemporary service was at 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
Why, I have no idea it was that early. We certainly weren't drawing many college students or young adults to that time frame, but that's when it was.
Yeah.
And I wish I could pinpoint the year we made that change, but
I can't remember.
that's been another evolution in the life of First Baptist Church. It's been a positive change for us.
Yeah. Very cool.
Ken, you kind of touched on this, but if you would maybe just share with us maybe why is it worship specifically that was important to you? Like you talked about your salvation experience and being drawn to ministry. What is it about worship? I know music is a large part of that, but then there's more to worship than just music. Can you kind of speak on that and just what it is, why it's important to you?
Sure. First, I would say a lot of times when we talk about worship, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. Most people kind of think, well, worship is that thing you do in church between this time and this time. It's the 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes before the pastor gets up. That's worship. And I've never thought of it that way. That's a part of worship. But worship is a lifestyle thing. The scripture I would go to is one that's familiar to all of us. But in Romans 12:1, Paul writes, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by God, the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." Mm-hmm. So worship's not it can be singing. I mean, I'm a musician. Play guitar and bass guitar, and I love leading choir, singing. That's a part of worship, but that's not all worship is. Worship's a lifestyle thing. I was thinking about this. I wasn't exactly sure what we'd be talking about, but I've had some tremendous worship experiences sitting in a deer blind, watching the sun come up, or being on the side of a mountain in Colorado, or on the Sea of Galilee a couple of different times. Not singing a note, just taking it in and watching God's creation, and that's worship. And so sometimes it may not be singing at all. I've worshiped at home in the mornings when I read my scripture and spend my time. That's worship. So music can be a part of it, but that's not all it is. And so that's kind of my take on what worship is. I love leading corporate worship. I love being a part of that. I love hearing people sing. It's been my honor and pleasure for almost 38 years of full-time ministry now to lead choirs and singing. And I joke about it sometimes. I'll say in our corporate worship, the best choir in the house is the choir that's in the house. It's the whole group getting together and lifting our voices. Some of them sing really, really well. Some of them may not sing at all, or not sing well. Some may not sing at all. I've experienced a former member who I thought, wonder why they don't sing. They stand there and never sing, and was humbled when they said, I can't, because if I do, I just start weeping. Mm. Yeah. And that's as much worship as me lifting my voice and singing it. Yeah. So anyway, it's important. It's been a part of my life for a long time. I grew up in little kids. I remember being in preschool choir and growing up and being a part of musical things. Got my start in doing musicals in junior high. Just jumped in on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So when you're younger, was music a big part of your life kind of thing, or was it just something you fell into?
Right.
It was a big part of my life, but it wasn't because it was like a big family thing. My mom and dad, later in life, they started singing in church choir, but it's not like they were big singers or big musicians. I don't know I don't know what the draw was there for me. Well, I guess the thing I would point to for me was our youth choir at church. We had a youth choir at church. It was a big type thing, and I look forward to the day that I could be a part of that. And then I started in junior high, got into choir in school, and those were just things that captured me. I had some success, I guess,
cool.
Being a part of that. Enjoyed it. Even my little church that I mentioned in Ohio, I had opportunity. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I had opportunity to lead our youth choir. We was like, hey, well, let's have a youth choir. Well, who's going to lead it? Well, I don't know. Ken, can you do it? Well, okay, I'll try.
And I'm thankful for that era. I know that's kind of phased out a little bit just with the evolution of, I guess, worship music, but I was part of youth choir. And my parents were actually a part of a pretty life-altering youth choir when they were teenagers. And so it was kind of natural that I transitioned to that. But I learned so much about formal music in that youth choir and different parts and things. And I wasn't really paying attention. I mean, me and my buddies were just expected to be there, so we had fun. We had a lot of fun. But we learned under Walter Grady, which I'm sure you're very aware of. He was my
I know Walter.
director, so he taught us really well, whether we were realizing that or not, and it still benefits me a ton to this day to learn those things. But those were valuable times to me, and in the moment I didn't. It was just 5 o'clock. I had to go to youth choir.
I tell this story sometimes to family and friends, but so we had a great youth choir in Georgia, was where I started in youth choir, and had a man who'd led us. And of course, I leave there, move on, go to 3 different churches, go to college, get a degree in music. And I went back for like the 95th anniversary of the church, the little church that I grew up in. And we had the big youth choir reunion.
Oh, that's cool.
And the guy that led us was still alive, and he was leading us. And I remember had music in my hand, and we're singing, and I'm thinking, we're not singing this right. And it was that moment I thought, you know what, all those years when I was a kid, I'm not sure we did any of this right. This guy he wasn't a trained musician. He just led youth choir.
Yeah.
The lady that was our accompanist, I'm not sure she ever played exactly what was on the page. She just played something and we sang.
Yeah.
But it did make me appreciate the fact that the Lord gave me the opportunity to study and to try to do things. And I love those folks. I had the greatest time. That gentleman and his family and that experience and growing up in youth choir was great. We went on some choir tours to Florida and man, that may be the kind of thing you were saying. What inspired me or got me into it? It was that kind of stuff. I think that's what the Lord used in my life to draw me that direction.
And it's even the full circle of that, like, it didn't come out perfect. Not everybody was singing the right part, but the living sacrifice piece in Romans 12 is just doing the best you had with what you have and giving it back to God. And I had the blessing of working with Ken for a few years, and when I think of Ken, I will always think of, because he was super helpful. In this moment, we went to Phoenix, and he was more than willing to cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it was incredible, by the way. But he did it with a joyful heart. And so to be a living sacrifice is not just, giving back what you have to give back, but joyfully just being honored to serve others and serve the Lord as a living sacrifice.
And that was actually my second go around on mission trip. Well, yeah, we went to Colorado. You're right. I mean, you were brand new on the scene. I was surviving
that year, so that was everybody was all.
Hallie Hughes and I did the cooking on that trip.
That's right. Yeah.
Took my wife with me on the Phoenix trip.
I do remember that now.
Yeah.
That summer was a blur. I kind of remembered what was happening by Phoenix, but no, it's good stuff.
I think it's cool, like, hearing that in, like, some experiences, everybody's kind of experience is different when they end up in, like, a kind of a musical worship setting. Like I used to be in punk rock bands,
Yeah.
and landed in worship,
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you're saying like, oh, your church had a choir and they invested in this youth choir, and then your school had a choir, and I think the older I get, the more I try to pause and retroactively look back at like what God was doing way back when that like might have been tedious or I wasn't even paying attention to. That like I married a Hispanic woman and I took 12 years of Spanish, and like I'm a rarity in that most kids didn't do Spanish from 1st to 12th grade.
Yeah.
That's just whatever we got offered it through 5th grade. I just took it as elective the rest of the way out. Just thought this is easy, whatever. And then like it, I look back now and go, hey, that worked out. Like I had like a basic foundation of Spanish when I met my wife, so we could actually speak because she had zero English. So like it's cool to like hear that like, oh, well, you just have these little moments, not knowing that, well, this is where you're going to land. That like those moments of just going to, and then even you, Gary, like just going like it's 5:00 going to children's, and then but one day you'd be doing worship and those things would be beneficial, and it's fun to look back and go, okay, yeah, God, you kind of know what you're doing.
He's
like,
on it.
Despite I was paying attention. So.
And speaking of punk bands, go back and listen to like Hillsong, mid 2000s. That vibe was kind of punky.
Yeah, that's about the time I was segueing in, so it just kind of was a good fit. So.
It's crazy. I think with that, Ken also, aside from going to serve and helping the youth, there were some years I was leading worship, and Ken was super helpful in helping me learn how to lead people and work with a team, which was vital and super significant. So he's worked with traditional and contemporary worship both. For the age-old discussion of what's better, traditional or contemporary worship, you've served in both areas. What would you say to that individual that is more passionate about one than the other?
What would I say to him? I think you need to, you need to try to breathe a little bit and not be so negative about something that, we operate in this kind of our preference.
Yeah.
So I have a preference, and if it's me, I like leading a choir just because the second I stepped foot on campus, I longed for the day I could take choral conducting. I just wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for me until coming here to have an experience in a contemporary kind of a setting.
Yeah.
I'd just not done that. And in fact, when I came here, our contemporary service was a keyboard, a guitar, played by Brandon Brister, and me singing. That was cool. The contemporary service. I had to learn kind of that world. That was not my forte.
Yeah. And
so we did that for a little while, and then Brandon left and Gary came on scene, and that he had done a lot of that. So we worked together, and he said, if you'll kind of let me take the lead on this, and I was like, you go ahead, and so really those first several years were more me sort of learning that genre.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it, listen to a lot of it, I just not led it, and that was not my experience, and so I had to learn that. And that was not your question. I don't know how I got off on that.
That's good.
But what would I say to that person? We all have our the thing that we kind of like best, and I like this, and you may like that. What frustrates me sometimes is folks that want to look down your nose or try to throw shade on the other kind. Oh well, that's this, and it works both ways. So there are people in contemporary who don't care much for the traditional kind of thing, and I lead the more traditional, and so there's some of those that are kind of like, oh, those guitars and all that stuff. Well, don't.
Was there a
I just
Pete
don't
guitar
understand.
On stage?
I don't understand
Good question
that.
for
And so
everyone.
I'd say, why don't everybody's got their preference. All of it, when you boil it down, all of it is seeking to give praise and honor and glory to the Lord. So whether it's being done with a small semblance of an orchestra and a pipe organ and a keyboard, or whether it's four guys and guitars and drums and the heart of it is we're wanting to praise the Lord, and so let's focus on that and not throw out trite things like singing those 7-Eleven songs and stuff like that. That just always irritated me. And I came up, when I got into church work and worked in my first church, I came up with what they called the worship wars. There was the big contemporary versus, I mean, that was a hot deal back in the early 80s when I was kind of getting my start. And a lot of churches split and went through a lot of problems over that stuff. And so even when I came here, I fell into this, what I would call a blended worship kind of a thing. It was I love old hymns. I love singing old hymns. I love contemporary new stuff. I really like, and there's a lot of writers out there today that are taking old hymns and putting a new hook, a new chorus in it that gives it some new life. I look for those things. I try to do that. And so, I just think we need to kind of relax and not be so one-sided on everything, I guess would be my thing. I enjoyed my time both singing in, and then I was a bass player in the contemporary service for a number of years. We lost a bass player, and I told Gary, I said, well, I don't know if I can do this. I've always wanted to learn how to play bass, and I'll give it a try. And if I stink, tell me I stink, and go find somebody else that can play bass.
I also want to know how to play bass one day correctly.
I'm fumbling through keys right now to be in the same situation.
So had the opportunity to watch Gary kind of lead us in rehearsal, and then so when you stepped into that role, my being able to say, hey, whatever I can do to help you do that. And then there was a period of time when I had to lead that whole thing, and so learning how to do that is it's knowing your craft, knowing how to work with folks. I learned real quick that you don't come to rehearsal and not know what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I should have known that from my choral experience. I don't go to rehearsal on a Wednesday night not knowing what I want to accomplish and how I think I want to get there. And I shouldn't do it walking into a praise band. Hey guys, here's how we're doing this song. Here's the set list. Here's the order we're doing it. You need to know that we waste a whole lot of, and because I've been a part of it, we waste a whole lot of time going, how did we do that song? How does it go? No, come in and know what you want to do.
It's a bunch of people that don't read formal music.
Well, you played with Brandon Brister for years, and that's how he did everything. He's like, we're going to practice 30 minutes of the song. Look at me, and I'll show you when to end. You're like, that's not practice, Brister. That's... I have a lot of stress right now.
That's awesome. That's church, though. So currently, when we're recording this, the Cross Conference is going on. I don't even know where it's at, but it's a conference for college students on missions. And there was a discussion on the way here, a panel about the significance of church and being part of church and not being, we've talked about this several times, but on your own as far as living out your faith. But whether this individual in the church likes traditional worship and this one likes contemporary, that's the beauty of it, right? Learning why do you love that? What is it about those songs? And usually they can go back to what the Lord spoke to them through that song or this song. Even the working together as a group, we strengthen, we flex those fruits of the Spirit muscles, getting through those things, whether it be gentleness or patience, perseverance with one another, because that's part of it. It's learning to get along and knowing at the end of the day, like in band practice, no matter how practice went, when we get done, we're going to sit down and we're going to share prayer requests and we're going to encourage each other and pray over those things. And that's church. And I think that's the way the Lord intended it to be challenging, because we're working together as the church to ultimately, like you said, honor Him with our gifts. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think you should be commended for having like a pretty good heart posture, because you're at, you go into a traditional worship world, right? And then as, that's kind of aging out, or, churches are getting younger, and then you have churches who started producing their own praise bands, and like you have your hill songs and your elevations and things. But like you said, it's you've seen it split churches, and that's a thing, and people do draw lines in the sand, and but to see you take a heart posture of like, okay, it's not necessarily my thing. Yeah. I more was in the trenches of traditional, and that's my bread and butter, is leading a choir. But but I'll play bass. I'll actually play the most unglamorous instrument. in the praise band just to like learn it and like keep this going. And like you said, it's not really about your preference. It's just about coming with a heart of worship, you know?
Yeah.
So
you've modeled that in a lot of ways.
and that
20 years. 20
it is
years
encouraging.
in.
I mean, and I'm sure it was more dramatic than we're making it seem when all that change is happening. I'm sure there's a little bit of fear there, but like you trusted the Lord and you've been here for 21 years, you know, and so it's good.
I've sat in meetings where I'm kind of freaking out about changes that are happening. Ken's not really batting an eye because he's been there before.
He's like, whatever.
That matters.
It'll all be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, we all deal with change in different ways. I'll share this just since it kind of relates to this whole deal. So several years ago, before Gary came as our pastor, we went through an interim pastor. And when you're the staff guy, because I've gone through this a couple of different times. When you're the staff guy and your lead pastor leaves and you're going to get a new one, that's always an uneasy time.
Right.
Because you don't know who's coming and you don't know what his bent is going to be.
That's true.
And so I went through a year or so that year we were Swain, who did a great job, and I loved it. But I went through a year of saying, okay, Lord, I don't know what the next pastor is going to be like. And he might come in here and say, you know what, we're not doing two completely different services anymore.
Yeah.
So can we do all of this together and make it quality and do it well? What's that going to look like? And I had a lot of sleepless nights, I would say, thinking, okay, I think we can do it, because I know churches that do it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of churches that do choir and orchestra and praise band and the whole night. They're all on stage. It takes more work, because when you're dealing, and at the time we had brass players, and that's a whole music theory kind of a thing, but brass players and band players play in different keys.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out how you're going to do this all together, I knew in my mind it couldn't be the band, you go practice downstairs on Wednesday night and we're going to practice up here and we'll just get together 20 minutes before church on Sunday. That wasn't going to cut it anymore. So we were looking, I'm staring down the pipe of a whole paradigm shift and saying, okay, if that's what happens, can I do that?
Yeah.
Can I pull that off? And said, I think we can. I just don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to have to change how we do stuff here. And I don't like change all that much. But fortunately, I think of course, the Lord knows what He's doing, and sent Gary, who's been a lifelong friend and worked with him before, and we didn't change. We kind of kept things the way we were. So, but I was looking at that and thinking about it and pondering it and wondering, can I do this? Can I stay? Fortunately, that didn't happen. But
I've always thought it's a cool and unique thing that our church has two different styles of worship. I've always thought that's just a cool thing. Of course, we're fortunate enough that in our attendance we have enough people come that we can have two services on a Sunday. It gives us the opportunity to do that. But
one of the things that prepares my heart the most is when I'm coming in to play worship, the modern, contemporary, whatever, that I'm singing hymns on the way in that I learned growing up. That's just, I don't know why, it's kind of like my pump up before I lead worship is singing hymns as I'm passing everyone walking out of the sanctuary. And
like Dustin Searles, who leads the contemporary service, that guy has a heart for hymns.
Absolutely.
And he's they're not going to die on his watch. I've had multiple conversations where, he and I, I think we both would call "Be Thou My Vision" our favorite worship song. Yeah. I appreciate his heart in that too, that he is also no, hymns are going to be a thing, even in the contemporary services. These people need to hear them, even if they're kind of ugh. It's nah, you need to be challenged in this. That worship's been going on far longer than Hillsong has been around. So and I think that's good. I think it's good to be challenged in that way. Because, I did time at your home church, in Ardmore First for a couple of years. And they actually have two services that happen simultaneously, which I thought was wild. But, props to Dr. Fannin for not having an ego. And like, sure, man,
Right.
if people want to go do a contemporary service with the more contemporary message and contemporary band, that's great. I went to Dr. Fannin's though with the traditional, even though I was like doing music with Dustin and in praise bands and stuff like that, because the guy, you know, conducting dude, you could just tell his heart was in it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this dude gets me pumped.
Yeah.
Like this guy like leads me to worship, even though this isn't normally my world. It was good to be challenged in that though,
Right.
you know, during my time there.
Absolutely.
Ken, do you have a favorite hymn?
I knew that was coming. I could feel it.
I thought of it a minute ago. I wanted to ask it.
The big joke is almost every Sunday I'll say, "Oh, this is one of my favorite hymns." So I don't know if I have a favorite. I have a list of favorites.
Yeah.
Sunday we're going to do "Worthy of Worship." It's number 3 in the hymnal. It's right up front, and that's one of my favorites. I've just always enjoyed doing that one. But you know, the Southern Baptist. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. That's so I've got quite a few that are one of my favorites.
That reminded me of something too. I want to ask to bring this up just for fun. People that are close to you know that you're part of the Singing Churchmen of Oklahoma, or have been. For people that don't know what the Singing Churchmen is, what is the Singing Churchmen of Oklahoma, and what is your participation in it?
The Singing Churchmen of Oklahoma is comprised of ministers of music, but not limited to that. It's staff, male staff members, because there are several pastors that sing in it. It's a group of men who get together and sing once a month and travel all over the world. I've had the opportunity in my time with them to go to Israel, to Armenia, to Russia, went to Sochi for the 2014 Olympics.
Oh wow, that's right.
That's really cool.
We went to Washington D.C. The latest trip that I went on in 2017. We went to Washington D.C. for Memorial Weekend and did a concert at the Kennedy Center and at the World War II Memorial one afternoon. And so anyway, That's the composition of the group, led by Dr. Randy Lind, who is the worship leader for the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma, and now also the worship pastor at Southern Hills,
Okay.
which is where he's been before. So he's back there again. So great group of guys. I've sang with them. Let's see, I moved here in December of 2003. I started singing with them in 2004. And sang with them, had the privilege of serving as president in that 2017 season. And just some health issues have caused me to not be able to sing with them for a couple of years now. I'd like to get back and sing with that group, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. I just, because of some health things, haven't been able to do that like I want to. But
When I was younger, my grandmother told me she really loved hearing a men's choir. And as I got older, I was like, where did she hear a men's choir? Where do you hear a bunch of men singing together? But when you hear a bunch of men singing together, it's powerful. I've listened to that choir or like been at a men's conference, and just something about men from their chests singing loud the Lord's praises, like it's really cool.
It's one of my greatest honors was to be a part of that. Dr. Bill Green, everybody kind of knows who Dr. Bill Green led it when I first started. Had several different directors over the years, but there's something about being a group of 150 to 200 men and a 40-piece orchestra to go with it.
That's the Falls Creek guy, right?
Bill, yeah.
I played timpani for him.
Did you really?
I got to do the timpani.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like in 7th grade.
should be acknowledged somewhere.
So, yeah.
7th grade Corey. We need footage of that.
We do.
It was way before you filmed everything. So
You had to have a comb over, like something going on at that time.
I was probably just shaved. Like, it's probably just buzzed in 7th grade.
Well,
Buzzed seventh grader.
you're in very good company then. I
Yes.
think when they dedicated the new tabernacle, I think James Langford played the timpani that night when they had the big celebration. So you're
Because
right.
they did like a
That's
kid,
cool.
like a student orchestra. I remember
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So it just like showed up.
And a student choir, remember that?
Yep.
Man. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I've got one thing. If
Go for it. Yeah.
Ken, we kind of touched on this earlier, but I do want to bring up the administration side of things when it comes to church, because some people may not understand or know that a church, especially of our size, does function a lot like a business in a lot of ways. I mean, we're a nonprofit 501c3. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit of the day-to-day as a church administrator on a church of our size, what that entails, and also why it's important?
Okay. On a day-to-day basis, it's and when you're a church administrator, it's almost like being the minister of education. There's not a whole lot that doesn't touch. Mm-hmm. So it encompasses building maintenance, paying the bills on all of utilities that we have. It also encompasses doing some personnel stuff. I oversee our support staff, which are three. Well, it's more than three. We have a financial manager, our receptionist, and our secretary. And so there's those three, full-time custodian, 2 part-time custodians. So I oversee that, which is HR-related kind of stuff. Approving purchases, every purchase we make. We do a lot of Amazon, as you know, we do a lot of Amazon purchases. So a lot of those things have to come through to get approval before they're spent. It's helping put together the annual budget. I mean, it's a myriad of things. Assisting and helping with our church management software, which is Realm. So I mean, there's many things that it encompasses. You say building maintenance, you got HVAC, you got lights, water. I mean, it's all of that rolled into one.
Yeah.
Encompasses everything.
Yeah. And I mean, that stuff's important just to keep us functioning.
Yeah.
And do our mission and vision.
It's got to be done, and it needs to be done in an orderly fashion. So we have we kind of have in fact, I just got certified this last summer as a certified church administrator, which is some coursework that I did. Part of that was doing a project, and my project, because we had no written financial policies for the church. I mean, we've got bylaws and personnel policies, but if you wanted to sit down and say, how does the financial end of First Baptist Church work, there were no written guidelines. So part of my project was to put those in writing so that you could hand that document to anybody and they could read through it and go, oh, okay, if I want to purchase something, here's how I go about it. From collecting our tithes and offerings, how does that get deposited into the bank? What are the steps that we go through to see that gets collected, counted, put in the bank? All of that is in that document. So that was part of my project to finish my certification. And then some just other little tidbits that you get to do when you're administrator is keeping up with the latest federal guidelines. Things such as family leave and the overtime wage stuff, tax liabilities. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that people just kind of gloss over and don't pay any attention to. And unfortunately, in the day and age in which we live, if you don't cross every I and dot every T, you could possibly face fines, hefty fines, fines that that could put you out of business, and nobody wants that as a church. No. So you're trying to ride that line between doing ministry and trying to do things the right way, according to the laws of our land. So all of that in administration. Yeah.
At this point in your career, would you say what percentage are you spending on administration stuff versus worship stuff right now? Which one's getting more of your time?
Gosh, I don't know. I wish I could say it's 50-50. It's not. I find myself spending less and less time doing the worship in, which is really my passion, the thing I'm more passionate about. But also realizing that the days of doing that are probably drawing down, and I'm going to do more. And I enjoy the administration stuff. It's not like it's a burden. And so as I press on, I will probably end up doing more of that. There will be a time. There will be a time in my ministry here, I think, when I will cease to do worship. I don't know when that. Don't know when that is. It's coming, and I won't do that anymore. Yeah. And so I'll step into full-time administration and probably do something else. I mean, I'm real involved in our Celebrate Recovery ministry here. Enjoy that. Maybe senior adult ministry, is down the road. That's an area that we've not ever. I mean, we. In fact, my predecessor as administrator was the senior adult director as well.
Right.
But
yeah, well, I'm thankful as a church member, as those roles sometimes, like we've talked about, spread you thin at times. The person you are allows those things to bleed into each other. Your worship bleeds into administration bleeds into the other. So it's the significance of you being in those roles and the time that you spent. We're blessed either way.
Yeah, church family. Next time you see Ken, you probably weren't aware of
no
how
kidding.
much he's doing behind the scenes and,
There's a lot.
and really thankless work, but like very, very important work.
And the administrative role, that sounds like it could be monotonous. I worked in church world long enough. It could be a docu-series on its own.
Yeah, no.
When you're dealing with the issues that come up and the things that you have to navigate with wisdom is a challenge, I'm sure. But
there's a lot to do. And it's a lot of it is some things that people don't think about. When we hire somebody new, when you hire a new employee, there are steps that you have to go through to get them hired, and there's legal things we have to do in order to pay them, because we have to pay taxes for them and things like that. So there are. We've got a whole booklet of here's the steps to hire somebody, and here's what you have to do it. And so you just kind of have to say here's the right way to do these things. Reimbursing somebody, we have members that go do something. Well, I need to be reimbursed. Well, there's a procedure for that. We don't just reach in the back and pull out money and say here you go.
Yeah.
So it takes on a whole.
Yeah, sometimes Ken hands me checks and I don't know what they're for.
And I'm like that.
All right,
That'll work.
I'll take it. But it's usually reimbursed for something. And
That's awesome.
But yeah, like you said, there's a huge process. So by the time I'm reimbursed, I'm like, I don't remember what this is for, but sure, thank you. And stuff like that, because it's tedious and it's huge. You got to go through a lot of steps, and it's, and so we're definitely thankful that you're doing so much of that work behind the scenes just to keep the lights on. And I'm keep people paid, and so I have a question though, Ken, because you've been doing worship in a musical capacity for 21 years. Have you ever dealt with like burnout? Like you're just like, because I have done it for a fraction of the time, but I've been doing music with Dustin Searle specifically for like 10 years. And Dustin will tell you that I'm the first guy in a band to be like, if we ever play this song again, I'll quit. It's just like you get in this kind of almost like jaded, or like you just kind of get hardened to certain or just doing it because it gets repetitive, and you have to like be challenged to like bring yourself back to like the whole heart of worship thing. And so have you experienced that in your time, just where you're just it's just like it becomes a chore and you have to kind of like motivate yourself, or really just go to the Lord and be like, reinvigorate me in this?
The only thing that I would maybe sort of touch on that is the living Christmas tree can be kind of that sort of feeling like I'm burned out, not sure. But part of that for me was when I first came here and started doing it, we did it every year. And that really became tedious and kind of burnout. And so it didn't take me but about 3 years, I think. And then I thought, this needs to be an every other year thing.
Yeah.
hopefully to generate a little more excitement when it does come around to doing
for
it.
sure.
So that was for me. But and I've probably gone through some seasons where you kind of feel dry, or but for me, I've never gotten burned out on what I get to do in terms of leading worship.
That's awesome.
It's that thing. It's that idea. If your work is something you truly love to do, it's never work.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not drudgery or something that I dread going in to do. I love what I get to do, and I get to get paid for it. I mean, so it's never old. It's never the same. I mean, day after day, it's different all the time. I had breakfast with somebody this morning, and they were asking me about putting together worship, and kind of what my deal was, and I said, well, what I like to have is I really like to know what my pastor's preaching on. Mm-hmm. I wish I could know those many weeks in advance sometimes, but more often than not, it's on Monday at least I'll find out, hey, this is what I'm preaching next week. Because I like to try to sit down and say, okay, here's the topic. This is what you're preaching on. What can I do musically that touches that? When Gary sent me his outline this week and said I'm preaching on Philippians 2, well, the choir does it. One of my favorite choir anthems, one of my favorite songs, is this "At the Name of Jesus," which is based on Philippians 2, 1 through 11. And so I knew, boom, we're doing that song. Even though the choir hadn't practiced, that's one that I know we can pull out and we can do it, and we're gonna run through it Sunday morning and sing it.
That's awesome.
That's
don't
awesome.
have a lot like that, but there's a small handful of songs that I could go, oh yeah, we're doing that one.
And I think it's cool for the church family to hear, because sometimes I think people don't understand that that's part of your job, is also being very intentional with the songs you do. Because sometimes I think some people might just think, oh, Ken's just picking his favorite songs, or it's just he picks them out of a hat. But no, there's an intentionality behind it. It's what you feel moved to do, or what is going to enhance the sermon, you know, and like really, draw people in. So I think that's cool for people to hear.
Yeah, you're inclined to lead people to the scripture that Gary is speaking over them. Like that's bigger than just showing up with music.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the first song that we're going to sing congregationally is a hymn called "At the Name of Jesus." So that one, and I shouldn't be amazed, but the Lord, I'm often just amazed at how some of that just falls into place. It's not like I had to labor over this and go, oh, what song are we going to do? It's okay. This is what it is. Lord, help me know. And you're trying to grapple all kinds of things. You want to find songs that textually speak to maybe what that is, and then does it fit in key relationships? Can you go from this song to this song? Are they in the same key? If they're not, is it easy to get from this key to this key? And I have been blessed here for 21 years to have a couple of accompanimists that it really didn't matter what key, they could get you from one to the other.
Yeah.
Just, hey, we need to modulate and go from here to here. Can you do that? And they'll work it out. But it's not always been the case in my musical career. But all of that goes into trying to plan a worship service. That's my process. I don't know what other guys do, but I try to be cognizant of that. You can't always, those messages that Gary did on the prophets. Those were not easy to, And in those times, I just revert back to what can we do that gives praise to the Lord.
Exactly.
You just not everything. We've got this one book, and it's kind of finite. It's not every song in the world, and not everything that's going to touch that. So, but I've got tons of them on my shelf, and a lot of different resources that I try to draw from.
Now, I mean, and that's really cool. I think even for me and Garrett, who are on the contemporary worship team, it's cool to hear that side of, the traditional service and things like that. I know Dustin picks our songs normally, and I know he puts work and thought into those things, and and it's two different worlds where you're working out of a hymnal and you're working with like songs that can be really, really old. They've been around forever, and meanwhile in praise and worship, you're trying to keep up with all the new stuff constantly. You're almost running in the opposite direction constantly, and you have people like me and Garrett, they're like, hey, let's bring back some
Yeah.
something from 2012.
Nostalgia.
you know, but you know, in the contemporary world, that's like, no, you don't do that. You just keep moving forward. And so like it's cool to hear your side of that world, and you know, and just how much goes into that. So
Can pull into the vault from those older songs.
Yeah.
and speak to some
still
stuff.
pushing.
I would say this, and you mentioned, and I just as the guy that's usually in the booth upstairs doing the graphics and to contemporary, my observation has been this: most of the time when you do an old hymn, doesn't really matter how stylistically how you do it, if it's an old hymn, I can notice a difference in the volume level of the people singing.
Yeah.
It's obvious to me almost every time it happens.
Yeah.
When you do How Marvelous or some other thing that's a contemporary version maybe of an old hymn, though, those lyrics, you know, the people in the room, they know that, I think. And it's not to say they don't sing others well too, but I notice a lot of times that when we rip off onto something like that, the volume just increases. And
It's it'll take you back somewhere.
right.
Because you have somewhere back to go to where that song met you or the circumstance.
That, you know, it's sometimes it's just the Beatles type of thing sometimes, where it's just like a simple song is powerful rather than the contemporary we did that had like 4 key changes and you know, and like 8 time signature changes. It's like, no, just take it to something very simple. I think sometimes can really stop a room to go, all right, let's worship. This song's not necessarily taking us on a roller coaster. It's just we're singing a very simple tune, you know. And I think that's why hymns are still really powerful. Some of them are just pretty simple, but like stripped down. This is just straight up worship without all the bells and whistles. And I think that's why it's important for contemporary praise bands to keep hymns alive. You know, just because they all have their purpose. You know,
Absolutely.
so.
And it's fun to find kind of getting nerdy into music, but find the songs that our church connects to that end up kind of being our songs over time.
Yeah.
Because Dustin's faithful to introduce new music, and songs like Just As Good seems to be kind of like a tribal song that we've kind of taken on and resonates with our people for whatever reason, whether it was this season that we introduced it.
Yeah.
But no different than hymns in that way, that it's something the church takes on, even in a local level, which is kind of interesting.
For sure.
I'm encouraged, and we've even done some of them, even though I'm the traditional service. There's one that you guys do
cool.
that we've done as well. Some things like Sovereign Grace and Matt Papa. They're doing some things that really, if you didn't know better, you go, oh, that sounds like an old hymn. Oh, but no, they just wrote that, but it sounds like an old hymn.
There's like this movement of modern hymns where people are just kind of create, like, you know, again, and I think that comes from people, kind of a millennial generation. Like, I think Garrett and I grew up in churches, you know, where there wasn't a contemporary service yet. When I was in the youth group in FBC Durant, there was not a contemporary service.
Absolutely.
It was only traditional. You just went to early or late service. So I got my contemporary stuff on Wednesday night, Brister with an acoustic guitar. I think I was in the band too back then. And then you came and it was traditional. It was the choir, and you're like, and you're getting hymns, you know, and so it was good.
Then there was an era of like choruses when I was younger. You remember these little choruses that we'd sing? Anyways, I always thought those were so cool when I was younger too, because it was this, not a hymn, and modern worship wasn't really a thing yet. But those were.
But I think
I like those.
A lot of those people coming that grew up in churches with choirs that said, I like hymns and I want to write a modern hymn. You know, like that's what my bread and butter was as a kid, and those formative years of, you know, growing up in church and stuff like that. I think that's why you're seeing that. And I think it's really cool that there is this kind of movement of modern hymns in a lot of ways.
I've heard it referred to as take-home theology. Like, you're not going to remember every verse that Gary said, but there's some songs that you're going to take home and you're going to hum it, and you're going to remember some of the words, and you're going to repeat that chorus over and over and over. So that theology you're going home with is super significant, regardless of what service you heard it in.
I know we're trying to land the plane, but I do have a question. Do you have any choir members that come with requests? Like, do you have choir members like, hey, let's do this, or hey, we used to sing this back when, and now I want to in it? Do you have any of that?
I have not.
Really?
I've not had any that are like, hey, what? No.
Really? Because I text Dustin every other day, man.
We need like a process.
I'm like, I text Dustin the other day. It's like, hey, I want to bring Tremble back in 2025. Like, let's bring the song Tremble back. It's been dead for a few years. So let's bring it back. And he's like,
that's our problem in our situation. Yeah, everybody's throwing songs at Dustin
constantly. We're like, he's like, stop.
It's like a submission box, I guess.
So are you doing something, a throwback this coming? I just did the graphics this morning.
We are doing a hymn.
Are we?
I think How Marvelous.
Well,
I think we're doing How Marvelous.
I was thinking that one of the
King of My Heart is it was retired there for a minute, and that one's come back.
Modern hymn era.
Yeah.
These new goldies.
I mean, this doesn't come out before Sunday, does it? We're not spoiling worship.
Actually,
ideally it's supposed to be today, right?
Spoilers. So
if we stick to schedule, it'd be today.
Okay. All right.
How do you want to land, Cole? What do you think?
I had a few thoughts run through my head while we were talking. One thing that came to mind while I'll mention this, and we can kind of close, but we were talking about hymns and just the theology behind it. And with hymns, like we're talking about hymns, old hymns just are like stuck in our brains, like we remember those things forever. And a lot of times, hymns are exact quotes of scripture, like verbatim, a lot of times. And so by hearing the music and easily having it memorized, we've memorized the scripture unknowingly to us sometimes, even if we might just hear the hymn on it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, the beauty of music, yeah.
Well, some of the earliest hymn writing was strictly the scripture.
Just singing.
There were the Psalms. They would take the Psalms and set them to music. Then, like so many things in the musical world, they began to change and splinter off and go different ways. I mean, when I studied music in college, it's like you learn the rules. Here are the theory writing. Here's how you write music. Oh, but then came this guy who bent the rules and wrote this music, and then there was this guy that came along and bent the rules, and there was Beethoven and Bach and Stravinsky, and they so you taught me all these rules, music theory rules, and then you tell me, oh, but you can break them and change them. And so hymn writing was kind of the same way. First of all, it was only the scripture. That's all you only sang the scripture. But then people started writing lyrics and other things, and some of our modern day hymn stuff, the first music put to it was actually what people were hearing in the tavern.
Yeah, that was I thought of that.
Because they were tunes that people knew.
Yeah.
Before that, there were just guys that stood at the front and sang these tunes, and people were kind of like, yeah, okay, I don't know what that is you're doing. And then they began to say, well, what about these tunes you're hearing when you go drinking at the tavern? You know those tunes. Well, let's just set those to lyrics that
they're just catchy.
Oh.
Yeah.
And of course that was super controversial when it happened. Oh, I can't believe you're doing that. But that's the evolution of where it's come from.
Yeah.
It's come a long way from. We're just singing the scripture to words that people have put in, that the Lord's put in people's hearts to write. The Wesleys and the people who wrote great hymns and tunes that we sing today.
Yeah.
And then people like this Matt Papa I mentioned stuff. I love some of their new stuff that sounds like old hymns, but they're modern day translations of
In
it.
2025, there's a lot of good music out there.
Oh yeah.
There's so many good options of all kinds of genres in the music world, in the worship world, and everything. Singer-songwriters, there's tons of good ones out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think, I'm coming out of this conversation hoping that anybody in the church that listens to this is kind of challenged. I mean, we offer two kinds of services. We have a traditional service, and we have contemporary services, and I would say that I think people choose less about what style of music at our church. I don't think it's that divisive. Yeah. I think it's more about just what time they want to be out of church. I think it's more about just what time you want to eat lunch. And so I think that's more probably the choice here. But I hope like people get like challenged to be like, if you're in the contemporary services, to like maybe just dive into some hymns again, and if you're in the traditional service, to like open yourself up to the contemporary stuff, because like you said, it's despite the fact that worship's actually a broad term of how you live in like everything you do doing for Christ. It's not just music, but within the musical context, it's all about it's just the little drummer boy. It's just what you have to offer, to the Lord. And who cares if it's this or that, if it's an organ or an electric guitar, because I think even right now, just kind of talking to my wife, she works for the school district, the community's going through kind of a tragedy. And, though, if I'm listening to worship music, it's usually probably whatever we're playing that week, and it's contemporary, but like, this is a time where it's like you put "It Is Well with My Soul" on, because it's a song that's powerful of, just the glory of God in immense tragedy where everything seems dark and lost. But like that, you still succumb to that worship for the Lord, And I mean, we have our modern contemporary set in that kind of mythos, like, How He Loves has a story. Heart of Worship by Matt Redman has a story. But like It Is Well, I mean, it's a powerful story. It's a powerful song. And so like, I think it's just, like you said, this challenge to just be open to all of it. Yeah. And like not necessarily die on your hill or your preference or the line you draw in the sand, but to be like, no, worship is worship and it's great. Yeah. So
that's good. Yeah. It's when we have no words, these songs can be the theology that we need to say out loud together, collectively, and it's a special thing we get to be a part of. But so this conversation was really fun. Ken, we appreciate you and all the time you put in, and hopefully people can get a little glimpse. We haven't even covered probably everything that you do on a weekly basis, but
the tip of the iceberg, I bet.
I think every pillar we touch on, we can go for a long time explaining and talking about that pillar, and we'll do our best to cover those things. Next week, what do we got, Cole? Or next episode?
Next episode, we're going to talk about connection. Connection and its place in our mission, our vision statement, to connect with people and be a church of fellowship and a church of outreach. So we're going to spend time talking about that in our next episode.
Very cool. Go for it.
You can cut this out if this is not, but like, can anyone just join the choir? Do they just show up?
Yeah, there we go.
They sure can. We rehearse every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock.
So every Wednesday at 6, if you want to be in the choir, just
room 220.
All right.
Open, no auditions.
I can't wait to see who shows up now. I hope someone listens to this and shows up because of this at 6 p.m. on Wednesday night.
People might not know that. You can just show up at 6, on Wednesday and be in the choir, so like, by all means.
There's other opportunities
to take you
in this area of worship. I mean, you could be in the choir. We need folks to run the graphics. So I've got a lady who does it in the service that I lead. Had been doing it for the whole time. She's been doing it for 21 years. She's the rock. But we need folks to do it in the 10 o'clock and the 11:15. I do that quite a bit and would welcome some relief. Sound people, people in the studio. Right. We're live streaming services, and so lots of opportunities there. Yeah. Maybe play in the band or something too. If you're that requires a certain skill set, and Dustin will make you try out. Would want to meet with you and see where you are in that. Cool. But there's a lot of areas that you could serve.
Yeah. So if
in worship ministry.
So if you want to do that, find Ken. He'll find you a place.
Absolutely. I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm ready for a choir in the contemporary service.
Trust me, I'm all for combining forces at some point.
Yeah, sorry, Dustin. But so be a worshiper, a living sacrifice. Honor yourself or honor the Lord with who you are and what you do. Leverage it all, and now go make disciples of all nations.